on my end. I suppose we'll get started. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, Scott says hi from sunny Edinburgh. How are you doing, Scott? I hope you'll be enjoying the Fringe there in the next few weeks. I know Luke was just saying before he came on that he's going to be there pretty much every night. Was it, Luke?
Every night, every day. Sometimes working.
Yeah, sometimes working. Yeah, always having a laugh. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, we want to hear your questions and comments. To get tasting notes and comments in the chat throughout the whole way. We want these to be super interactive and for a lot of you who are on, I can see from the list of names in front of me that a lot of you are on from, was it Deanston we did before with the three of us on there about 2 months ago, and that was an absolute tremendous tasting. So hopefully this one is as good. And Julieann was with us last year for a Ledaig and Tobermory tasting as well. So yeah, we already know, regular digital drammers will know from experience that this should be a really good night. But that's enough for me for the time being. Do you want to introduce yourself first, Julieann, and maybe introduce the lineup that we're going to go in, and then you could bring in yourself then, Luke.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Julieann Fernandez. I am the master blender for CVH Spirits. We were formerly Distill International. So last year, and even at our previous tasting of Deanston, when you joined, we would have been Distill International, but we are now CVH Spirits. So I look after all of our single malts. This includes Deanston, Tobermory, Ledaig, Bunnahabhain, and also our blends, Black Bottle and Scottish Leader. And tonight we're obviously focusing on Tobermory Distillery. So we're going to take you through Tobermory 12, Tobermory 21, Ledaig 10, Ledaig 18, and then one of our limited editions, the Ledaig Bordeaux cask. So that's a 9-year-old. So yeah, really looking forward to tonight. As Luke said, a lot of you have been on here before when I've been on. So from that, you'll know that my colleague Luke and we're very relaxed. We're very open to questions, feedback, criticism, comments. So please do just say whatever you have to say. And yeah, I'll hand you over to Luke to introduce himself.
Hi folks, for those that have seen before, and welcome back, and hello to the new guys as well. My job within CVH Spirits is a national account manager. Now, there's only 2 of us in Scotland, and it's not a huge team. So I get to, when Julieann can't make the tastings and things like that, I try and step in and do my best effort and impressions of Julieann whilst we're doing these sorts of tastings and things like that. So yeah, we've got a nice wee sort of connection with our distilling team. We have loads of access to the guys that make the whiskey, which makes us want to talk about it. So that'll be why I'm here. But my big important job is actually making sure it gets from the distillery and the bottling plant all the way to the pubs, bars and restaurants, and of course the whiskey shop as well. So that's my connection for going on here. But I think, Julieann, last time we were here, we were given a very strong brief of like, let's get on the drams straight away, because we can otherwise sit here lecturing you for half an hour before you actually get to have a wee taste. So should we just crack on?
Yeah,
absolutely.
No, that sounds good. Yeah, that is for the peek behind the curtain there. I do lecture everyone before we go live. All you regular drummers saying we need to get into the first whiskey fast. We don't want you going thirsty. So if that's something you appreciate, I hope you enjoy it. So would you want to give us the lineup?
Yep. So I think we agreed that we're going to do the Tobermory 12 followed by Tobermory 21-year-old. Just obviously there are unpeated ones for this evening, and then we'll go on to Ledaig 10-year-old, Ledaig 18-year-old, and then finish with the Ledaig Bordeaux. So if anybody gets mixed up with the lineup or anything, please do just let us know. But yeah, as Luke said, we're very keen to get you nosing and tasting these drams. I don't know where everybody on the call is from, but given that I'm from the west of Scotland, by 7 o'clock we've usually had 4 or 5 by now, so I absolutely need a drink at this time. So yeah, as I'm kind of talking through this, please nose it, please taste it, and like we said, please just any comments, questions, let us know. So I'm not going to bore you too much with the history of Tobermory Distillery. It's more important that you're obviously nosing and tasting these whiskies and enjoying them. But just a little bit of a background about Tobermory. So Tobermory sits on the Isle of Mull. For anybody who's not been, it is the only whiskey distillery on the Isle of Mull. And yeah, it's one of the oldest commercial distilleries. So Tobermory Distillery dates all the way back to 1798. And essentially the history behind it was that planning permission was applied for a distillery. It was rejected, and eventually planning permission was granted for a brewery. But that obviously wasn't what the plans were. And eventually in 1798, it opened as actually Ledaig Distillery at the time. So we obviously have two spirits that we produce at Tobermory Distillery. We have our unpeated Tobermory and we have our peated Ledaig spirit. But it was known as Ledaig Distillery for a long time, because that's the little village that it sort of sat in. And for anybody who's not been to Mull, it's an absolutely beautiful place to visit. For anyone who has children or grandchildren, or young enough yourself to remember Balamori, the wonderful children's programme, and it showed all the colourful houses. That's exactly where our distillery sits. And yeah, essentially the distillery's past is just as colourful as the town's seafront. It closed quite a few times just through financial troubles. And there was a few times where we really thought that it wouldn't open back up, but I suppose with creativity and dedication, Tobermory has continued to fight through these struggles and continues to produce today. So as I said, it produces two spirits, Tobermory spirit, which is our unpeated spirit, and Ledaig, our peated spirit. Our production traditionally was split sort of 50-50. So half the year, 6 months of the year, we would produce our Tobermory spirit, and the other 6 months of the year, we would produce our Ledaig. But the demand for Ledaig we've seen is increasing, and Ledaig spirit, whether it's a non-age statement or an age statement, is absolutely phenomenal from the second it comes off the still. Whereas Tobermory, it just needs a little bit more time to rest. So in terms of the distillery, it's a tiny little distillery. And I feel like when it was built, they essentially tried to fit as much as they could into the tiniest little space. So the stills have got this sort of lantern shape, really steeply inclined lie pipe, and then this really strange S shape in the lie pipe as well. If you imagine trying to fit something into a box that it doesn't quite go in, that's essentially what our stills look like. So because of the shape of the stills, a lot of reflux, and it produces this really light, vibrant, fruity character, which we do think is reflective of our colourful town of Tobermory. So the 12-year-old, for those of you who have followed Tobermory for a while, we originally had 10-year-old Tobermory, and then the distillery closed down in 2017 for a few years. It opened back up in 2019, and that's when we launched Tobermory 12-year-old. So as much as the 10-year-old was a fantastic liquid, we just felt that it needed a little bit extra. And that's why we decided to add the 2 years of extra maturity onto it. And I think it's done it the world of good. So this is aged in American oak casks for 12 years. So majority bourbon, there's a little bit of virgin oak in there. And yeah, so what we do with all of our core spirits is 46.3% ABV, non-chill filtered. So you'll see the lovely legs that are on this whiskey, and absolutely natural colour. So all that colour in there is coming from the wonderful casks that we use. Beautifully sweet nose on this. So I'm getting a lot of vanilla coming through, a lot of coconut. Little bit of spice coming through just from some of those virgin oak casks that we have in there as well. So little, for me, it's a sort of cross between wood spice and cinnamon, almost like poached pears that are just sprinkled with a little bit of cinnamon.
I really enjoy the nose on this one. There's so much going on, and we talk about mouthfeel quite a lot of the time, and you'll get to that in the tasting part. But what I've discovered with both Tobermory and Ledaig is it's heavy vapors that come off it as well. They linger for a while and they stick to the back of your throat and all that sort of stuff. It's very reflective of the spirit, and it's oily. That's the thing, isn't it? It's very, very oily.
No, it's not really, Luke. It's nearly 7:45. So What I should have said at the start, folks, is running in conjunction with this tasting taking place. There's a golden dram going on. So for all the drams we're tasting tonight, except I think maybe the 9-year-old isn't included, the last one. But for the other 4, if you purchase tonight, you can use the discount code or not. Obviously more beneficial for you if you do. You get a chance to win a mull box, like a big collection of various Tobermory and Ledaig spirits. So definitely worth picking up a bottle afterwards to be with the chance to win that. So this is £42 normally, and obviously at the end of the tasting I'll be giving out that discount code, so you'll get 15% off. So as Paul says, no stewed fruits, you'd put in an Xmas pudding or Christmas pudding. Tony C says, are there production changes made, e.g. fermentation time, cut points between Tobermory and Ledaig, or simply a change to peated barley? Is there anything else that changes in the production process, Julieann?
Yeah, so fermentation time stays the same. Like I say, it's a tiny distillery, so our fermentation times we need to try and keep similar so that we can get as many mashes in as we can. But you're absolutely right in terms of cut points. So just to get some of those heavier phenolic compounds coming through in our unique spirit, the cut point is a lot later for Ledaig than what it is with Tobermory.
So I presume that means you get a bit less of it, is it then, when you're making the cut early, or is that spirit being going back through? It doesn't really make a difference. I'm just thinking about what you were saying about the production as well.
Yeah, so essentially it does, our heads and tails are kind of recycled throughout the process, but it's just about getting the key kind of flavour characteristics. And if we let Tobermory run too long, then we get some of the kind of unwanted heavier compounds that we're not looking for. Whereas with Ledaig, we're looking for those really heavy phenolic compounds that come off right at the end, which is why we extend our cut point when we're doing our peated spirit.
And Philip has said beautifully sweet and a touch of cinnamon on the finish. Luke, in terms of what you were saying about oiliness, do you have an opinion on where you think that mouthfeel comes from? Is it purely the spirit, or is it coming through aging, or any other thoughts?
I think it's probably quite a lot down to the amount of reflux that's going on in that still. Julieann was talking about it before, and having that really quite steep line arm and having a wee kink in it as well, which I'll offer something a little bit different. And every distillery will talk about that sort of aspect. But if you go to Tobermory, it does feel quite compact but industrial at the same time. It's a lovely little distillery to go and visit, because it's very raw and rough and ready and all that sort of stuff. And I know that the mash beer that comes off from that process as well is really, really fruity. It's really, really fruity, and you get a lot of tropical fruit flavors through there. And from what Julieann said to me in the past, and the distillery manager there as well, that contributes. And blended with that, the way that that's still shaped and the line on there and things like that, all just makes this really, really thick, oily spirit. And you run it around the inside of your mouth, and it feels like oil. It feels like some olive oil in there, perhaps. It's really, really interesting, and it lingers around as well. It's got a long finish to it, and that spirit characteristic is in both Tobermory and Ledaig for me. The spirit is essentially the same. One's peated, one unpeated, but the process of making that, apart from the cut points that Julieann was talking about before, mainly to do with phenols by the sounds of it, you're still getting that really oily spirit that comes off.
Oh, fantastic! And in terms of that ABV, Julieann, I know obviously it was similar with the Deanston at the same ABVs, and they're both 46.3. I presume it's a question that will be asked tonight, so we may be going to go a bit more into that before we move on to the next whiskey.
Yeah, so because we don't chill filter our whiskies, we keep all those lovely sort of fatty acids and esters in there, all those compounds that are really contributing to the burst of flavours that you're getting. So to keep them in solution and keep the whiskey looking really, really clear, you need to keep it above round about 43%. Otherwise, it starts to look a little bit cloudy. And for us, essentially, the decision was made that we would pick a strength that we felt our whiskies stood out at. And that was round about the 46. So at 46, the whiskey was crystal clear. You got the beautiful mouth coating that Luke's talking about. All the flavours were kept in solution, so it was crystal clear. Really, really beautiful taste. All the flavours were in harmony at this strength. And then, yeah, just to be a little bit different, we put that 0.3 on there because, like you say, you've asked the question, people ask the question, and it's a nice talking point. So we wanted it to be above 46 and we picked 46.3.
And I think just on top of what Julieann's saying there, and you mentioned obviously the Deanston being at 46.3 and Bunnahabhain being at 46.3, all of our whiskies are non-chill filtered and no colour added. You know, they're not losing that characteristic of mouthfeel. And I think mouthfeel is so important. You know, something can taste great, but if it doesn't linger around for a bit, or if it doesn't change character when you're drinking it, I think you're losing half the experience sometimes. And so that's something that I think with that 46.3, there's just the right amount of water in there for the spirit characteristic to shine through. And you'll see that with Bunnahabhain, you'll see that with Deanston, and you absolutely see it with Tobermory and Ledaig as well. Yeah,
no, interesting. Bob said a touch of water makes it even more smooth, creamy, light, fresh, and vibrant. I just added a bit of water myself there, and it brings out a lot of that lemon citrusy note in there as well. We also have a question from Mel saying, I'm getting butter, malty, biscuit, oak, very nice. Sorry, Tony has said, is the 12-year-old predominantly or wholly bourbon matured? I know you said American oak, Julieann. What exactly is the breakdown on?
So originally when we launched 12-year-old, because it was a transition from 10-year-old to 12-year-old, we had to correct some of the liquids. And so part of it was in American virgin oak and the rest of it was matured in bourbon. But obviously we're a few years on from that now. That was 2019. We're now in 2023. And our profile has changed and it has been fully matured in bourbon for the last couple of years now.
Brilliant. And Philippa said a slight hint of wood resin on the nose complements the vanilla. Bob said if only all distilleries produce whiskey at 46% ABV. It's funny. It's something that comes up a lot on these tastings. People do like the higher ABV ones, and it's funny because one thing that brands always say to us, and I always say, is that I mean I would totally agree. I'm one of those cask strength crusaders. I'd have every whiskey at 60%, but for most people I know in my life. Was out on a night out with a couple of friends recently, and people couldn't understand drinking whiskey at 40%. They thought it was too strong. So I don't know what they think if every whiskey was 60%. No one would, you know, you'd have about 1,000 people in the country who loved whiskey and no one else would drink it. James has said, I enjoy the waxiness of Deanston, and this has its own mouthfeel. I agree with Luke on mouthfeel, so important. One of the reasons I love Ledaig whiskey. This is my first time experiencing Tobermory. So there, brilliant. Would you go for your personal preference? I know obviously this is 46, but if you had to choose between a 40% 46 or something coming straight at natural cask strength, what would you go for?
So for me, absolutely 46% is the minimum. 46.3 is what we do all our core range at. It locks in the character, it locks in the mouthfeel. And I just feel that people work so hard. These days we're in a cost of living crisis to buy their bottles of whiskey. And if you want something that you can add water to or ice to, but not lose the flavour, you need to keep that ABV higher so that people have that flexibility to drink it how they want. So for me, 46.3 is the minimum. I do absolutely love a cask strength whiskey, but I think it's nice that we keep our cask strength whiskies for our limited editions, and it lets us be a little bit more expressive.
I think my answer to that is I trust Julieann as the master blender to get on with delivering the most delicious whiskey, and I think that 46.3%, you know, is where she's decided that this needs to sit, and I trust her that that's where it needs to sit. At the same time, you know, as she mentioned as well, you know, you talk about limited editions and older whiskies as well. You know, it's difficult to keep them above 46%. I know that, you know, several whiskies we do that are 30 or 40 years old are dipping below that, and then you get really scared when it wanders away from 40, because then it's not whiskey anymore. So there's lots of thought process goes into that. But you know, this is why master blenders across the industry have their reasons behind what they're doing, and it's up to you guys to decide whether you enjoy it like that or not. And if you do, I'm sure you keep coming back. So yeah, no, I like my whiskey ready to go out the bottle, and I know with cask strength stuff, it could be taking quite a bit of time to add the right amount of water and things like that, and we love that sometimes. But Friday night, you just need to have a whiskey ready to go.
Yeah, so vote with your wallet, folks. You know, boycott and divest from 40% whiskey. That's Luke's appeal. I feel like I you know, two very diplomatic answers there, especially Julieann bringing in the cost of living crisis. This is you know, I feel like I'm on a Politics Joe video or something.
It's probably worth mentioning. Obviously, His Majesty's Revenue and Customs are going to be putting up the spirit duty on the 1st of August. So make sure you buy plenty of whiskey in July, folks, because it'll be a wee bit cheaper per bottle. So yeah, there's a good excuse to go and buy all your Tobermory and Ledaig this evening with a discount code as well.
Yeah, but whatever you do, keep shopping with the whiskey shop. Don't go buying
it.
Yes,
absolutely, absolutely.
Don't go buying it in the Netherlands or something when the duty goes up. James said, I don't know about the others, but now when I see something 40 to 43%, I think they're trying to maximize revenue despite that taste profile and mouthfeel, and it puts me off. You've seen behind the curtain, James. You know that, you know, this is it's you've seen how the sausage gets made. Bob said the discount T12 Pheno cask is super. A discounted T12 Pheno cask super at 55%. So will we come on to the 21-year-old?
Yes, absolutely. So our 21-year-old essentially is the big brother of our Tobermory 15-year-old. So our 15-year-old was part of our core range, and then we discontinued it, but it was such a loved variant of our core range that we thought we had to do something and almost kind of bring it back. So yeah, this 21-year-old was filled into just your standard refill American oak casks in December 1999, and then it was transferred into the Oloroso casks in February 2015. So it spent about 5 years roughly in these Oloroso casks, and that actually is quite a long time. So when I talk about finishes, normally what I would say is you're looking at round about 2 years. So in Scotland, we don't have the warmest climate. We need it to be a little bit longer than what you would have in warmer countries, just for that sort of cask and whiskey interaction. But if you leave it too long, it's very easy for the flavors of the cask to completely overpower the wonderful spirit that's been put in it. But Tobermory, as Luke quite rightly said, it has this really sort of unique oily note that comes from the reflux in the still. And as the other Luke said, I get it as a really citrusy, for me, I get it as orange. It's almost like fresh orange peel. And I think because of that, oiliness and the citrusiness, it can really hold its own when you put it into quite a bold cask. So yeah, 5 years in the Oloroso casks, as Luke already said, again, natural colour, non-chill filtered, so you're still getting that beautiful mouthfeel, still absolutely packed full of flavour. And yeah, for me on this, I get a lot of marzipans. It's really nutty for me. I get hazelnuts, I get toffee. There's kind of freshly baked pastry in there as well, and kind of tied in with that marzipan. I almost get it like a cherry bakewell. Again, sorry, this is at 46.3, the same as our 12-year-old. And yeah, the oiliness in this almost comes over as it's almost like furniture wax or furniture polish, but in a nice way, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's almost like sweet furniture polish. It's a kind of fresh but sweet and nutty nose. And then on the palate, for me, I just mentioned those kind of Bakewell tarts that really, really carries through on the palate for me.
Yeah, the cherry Bakewell tarts is a great tasting note. It really, once you say it, it really hits the spot there. Although you've triggered me, Julieann, with saying that Laid Down in 1999 produced a 21-year-old, and you know, it's like when you're checking IDs in the door and you're like, you can't come in, you're born in 2005. Oh God, you know, it's like, yeah. You
start to feel old, I know. But yeah, that sort of cherry Bakewell note really, for me, it transpires onto the palate, packed full of cherries. The nuts still absolutely come through. Really rich mouth coating, as we mentioned, the exact same as what we had in our 12-year-old. That oiliness just coats your palate. And I know we obviously spoke before about having it at 46.3. For me, I feel when you chill filter a whiskey and you take it down to 40%, it almost goes up and over really, really quickly, and you lose a lot of that flavour. But as Luke said, with this being unchill filtered, the oiliness is coating your palate and the flavour really, really lingers. So for me, I'm getting a really long lingering sort of like brown sugars, demerara sugars. There's pineapple in there, there's sticky toffee. It's really complex, and that flavour just lingers because we're keeping that wonderful mouthfeel and the characteristics in there.
Like there's almost a really good base within the consistency of the liquid for the flavors to latch onto. The two different casks there that we've obviously used, the American oak and then into the Oloroso. This is me being biased within our own range, but this is actually my favorite whiskey within our core range. You know, I was at the whiskey show last year, and it was the first time I actually got to try it whilst I was on the stand, and I just kept going back to it every now and again, just going, no, this is really, really, really good. And then you start, you know, talking to everyone else about it, and then you start getting a little bit of a group of people going on the go and going, it's distinctly Tobermory. But I think people maybe with Tobermory, you predominantly find it in American oak. You know, I think it's something like, it's more than 90%, I think, isn't it, Julieann, that
Yes.
Tobermory goes into American oak. So to have a finish in an Oloroso like that is quite rare. And you know, this was in place of a limited release last year, and it's now part of the core range. And I just think it's such a great fit to show that versatility within that really, really oily Tobermory spirit. But yeah, my favorite dram from our core range, and I shouldn't have favorites. It's not my job to have favorites, but
yeah, well, as you say, and Julianne's answered the question in the chat as well. James has said, is this release core range, and you both of you have answered that in two different mediums there. So yeah, no, it's a fantastic addition. Paul said just a smooth finish, just a hint of pepper. Stephen has asked the price. So the price of this is 175 with the discount. It's 148. So not
great
bad.
price. Yeah.
Outstanding, right up my street. Love the sherry. Yeah, lots going on. This 21-year-old is very special. The more it definitely opens up in the glass as well since we poured it. I'm now getting a lot of kind of vegetable kind of notes in a really positive way, kind of maybe some stewed vegetables, and I was definitely not getting that at the start. So it's amazing how it keeps giving you something a bit different. James said this is great. Reminds me of 2008 Deanston Oloroso, but clingier in the mouth, smooth on the finish. I wanted to linger longer. Not that it's a short finish. Just wanted to keep going. So that's yeah. Now I want to go play the cranberries, but there you go.
Just building on what you said there, Luke, just quickly, it does develop in the glass. This one, you know, it's one of these ones you can add, you know, give it a little bit of heat with your hands and see what happens, you know, and it does really grow and develop. And yes, I do the hand rub trick, and you'll find different things going on. It's such a great dram. There's a lot going on. I think it's more complex than we let on. That'd be right, Julieann, I think. But
yeah, I definitely agree. It's really, I think sometimes people say, oh, it's a really complex dram and it's a bit cliche, but this genuinely is one of those drams that has so much going on. I think, as we've seen in the comments, when you initially nose it, you get a really sweet nose, you get the sherry, but it doesn't overpower that wonderful characteristic of the Tobermory spirit. So for me, I still get a lot of that fresh orange peel coming through. And then it does almost change. So it goes from the demerara sugar to the kind of light sulphury notes, as you mentioned. There's wood in there. Absolutely on the finish, that black pepper, which for me is a note that I really wouldn't associate with Tobermory. And yeah, Mark has said the woody nose and a black treacle finish. For me, it's so interesting reading these tasting notes, because you know yourself, they're so subjective, and what one person gets isn't what another person's going to get. So it's really good for me to read these and then sort of take note of some of them and steal them and claim credit for them the next time I do my tasting notes.
Well, Paula said this 21 is stiff competition from the 12. So that is both an insult and a compliment, but so brilliant. But the I don't know if that is that something, Julieann, that you'd be like, or Luke, whichever one, you'd be like, oh, I'm really proud that the 12-year-old can compete with something that's you know, much more age or a bigger price point, or is it like someone saying, actually, I fancy your sister? You know, it's like it's in the same family, but it's not, you know, it doesn't feel right.
Let Julieann answer first.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that comment. That was actually quite a good one. No, do you know what? It's I do think it's a compliment, because I think still in Scotch whisky, we do still have a lot of snobbery. And don't get me wrong, as much as the 12-year-old has that big age-stated 12 on the front, there is still a bit of that snobbery where people think the higher the age statement, the better quality the liquid is. And it's not necessarily the case. So for me, the fact that the 12-year-old can hold its own against a 21-year-old just shows the quality of the liquid it is. But yeah, I just have to reiterate what Luke said. For me, it's lovely that this 21-year-old's in Oloroso casks. Tobermory's not a one-trick pony. As he said, about 90% goes into sort of bourbon and American oak, but this dram just shows that it lends itself to lots of different cask types. So I absolutely agree. The 12-year-old is phenomenal. But yeah, the 21-year-old is special in its own way.
Brilliant. I can see Bob on camera there getting every last drop out of the bottle. So
licking his glass.
It's I suppose the finishing sort of comments on it would be at the start, Julieann quite rightly pointed out that Tobermory does better old. It becomes really interesting. And we're talking about sulfur there. When people talk about sulfur whiskies, I talk about them being a little bit funky, like if something's a bit of funk to it. And the older Tobermory gets, you just get a little bit more of that interesting funkiness to it. I think it's one of those characteristics that seems to come out, especially if it's been in some sort of sherry cask, whether it be Oloroso or otherwise. But yeah, the older Tobermory is, the better it comes across and the more interesting it is. And I think we've come a long way from that 10-year-old Tobermory, at that lower alcoholic strength, and then doing the 12, and then being really mature about it and doing the 21.
But before we come on to maybe a change up in pace and flavor with the Ledaig, you've obviously seen that the cold plunges are all the big thing now on online, and everyone's doing them. Mel's comment here is, I love drinking whiskey in the hot tub without the bubbles on. Put my whiskey in a large bowl glass and then let it whirl on top of the water. Amazing. Warmer whiskey is great. So that's the next trend once the cold plunges are out the way. We've got, I like sherry in a whiskey, but this started off as a negative, as got too much furniture polish, but growing on me quickly as taste lingers wonderfully. As you were saying, Jen, taste is obviously subjective. And Catherine says, hey folks, are these casks stored on the island or the mainland? And do you think it makes a difference?
Yeah, it absolutely does make a difference. So obviously we talk about the angel share, that sort of 2% each year that we lose from the cask breathing, and as it breathes out and loses that little bit, it breathes in as well. And when it's matured on an island, it takes in that wonderful coastal influence. So these casks actually did spend the first sort of 15 years of their life over on our warehouse at Tobermory. So for MD who's been to the distillery, as Luke said, it's a very compact, tiny little distillery. We joke about it. So obviously being from Glasgow, and we're known to be quite tight. And when you go and do the tour at Tobermory Distillery, it's, excuse my French here, but it's the shittest value for money tour ever, because when you're standing at the start of it, you can actually see the end. But jokes aside, it is a beautiful distillery. And it is great value for money, and that's coming from a tight Glaswegian. So yeah, the distillery itself is tiny, and we only have cask storage we usually keep about 8 casks on site. So these were on site, and then we obviously removed them back to the mainland for bottling. But when we do aged Tobermory's, the plan is, because there'll only be a few casks, try and keep as much as we can on the island, because I definitely do think it makes a difference.
No, definitely. I can see where you're coming from there. You don't measure your distillery tours in the distance traveled, but the friends you made along the way. And that is a great way to look at life. Before we come on to the Ledaig, is there any parting comments you have for Tobermory, Luke?
It's just one of these wee wonders, I think. Like we've talked about the size and scale of the distillery, and I know there's micro distilleries out there, but this was one of the smallest of its day, and still is one of the smallest sort of ancient Scotch whisky distilleries. And we've talked about Ledaig and we've talked about Tobermory, 2 different spirits there, but they also produce Tobermory gin. So you were talking about I know this is a whiskey show, but you were talking about the bundle you could win if you do buy a bottle, and there's the 2 gins in there too. So I think it's genuinely one of the hardest working distilleries in Scotland for its size. 3 different spirits, and in the space that they've got and what they do in that space is fantastic. And when we're talking about warehouses there. You know, if you do go on the tour, you do get generous drams from Olivier and Diana, the two very keen tour guides there, and they don't let you walk away without finding something you like if you're not quite finding something you like at that point, which is a lovely way to do it. But honestly, the Tobermory 21 is why I came along tonight, because I get to have a wee dram with you folks on it, because it is one of my favorites. So yeah, no, it's really interesting.
Marvelous. Antonio said it's delicious, folks. Well done. And we got Riot said 21 changes better as you drink it, but in the nicest way. So brilliant. But speaking of changes a bit, will we come on to the Ledaig 10-year-old? And maybe while we're pouring that one, folks, I said I wasn't actually sure because I didn't want to overpromise, but the 9-year-old is included in the Golden Dram offer. I just didn't want to make that commitment and then some of you be disappointed. But I checked while we were chatting there, and it 100% is. So there we go. I think all the Tobermory Ledaig whiskies
all Tobermory, yeah. I'm looking at the website there. The 23 and the 24 are also included in the Golden Dram effort. So yeah, no, how about we crack at?
No, definitely do. Definitely do. So I don't. James asked there. So what you're saying is, if I keep saying I don't like something, I get to keep tasting it. So.
That's a good tactic.
That's a very good tactic. I mean, you can try it out, but they're still just going to give you loads of drams anyway, because they just love people coming to see them. It's out of the two distilleries that we have. Again, I'm not supposed to have favorites. It's the most characterful tour because it's very intimate and it's not big tour groups, like which means when bottles get opened, you can ask for another usually.
For someone who's not supposed to have favorites, Luke, you've displayed a lot of them tonight.
No, you're playing your part. You're playing your hand.
Don't tell marketing.
Marvelous. So the Ledaig 10, who are you going to introduce this, Julieann, or is Luke's turn, or I don't know, how do you want to play this one?
Julieann can absolutely introduce the whiskey. Ledaig is definitely something that she has more knowledge about than I do, but I'm here to comment.
Not at all. So yeah, Ledaig 10. So as you're nosing and tasting this, I'll just give you a little bit more background into the distillery. So as we've said several times, it's a tiny little distillery. 3 spirits, as Luke said. We've got unpeated Tobermory, peated Ledaig, and our Tobermory gin. So our Tobermory is made with non-peated barley, so it's always less than 2 ppm on the phenols when it's delivered to site. But our Ledaig is peated malted barley, and it's sitting roughly between about 40 and 65 is what our spec is just now. And that just allows us to kind of get the most out of the barley without it being overly peated. We don't want our Ledaig to be an absolute sort of smoke bomb and kind of hit you in the face. Before we came live on the call, we were just talking about Ledaig and the type of smoke that it is, and it is a very, very different smoke to your typical island smoke. So I'll let Luke talk a little bit more about that. But yeah, so roughly about 40 to 65. It's a 5-ton cast iron copper mash tun, roughly about 9.5 hours in the mash tun, and then it's Oregon pine washbacks that we have, just 4 of them, as we said, not a big distillery. And then our wash still, it's about 22,000 litres, but we only charge it about 3/4 full. And then the spirit still is only 17,000. Our capacity, we were at 1 million litres of alcohol a year, but we are trying to push that up to round about the 1.3. And as Luke said, we obviously produce 3 spirits there. It is a very, very hard working distillery. Being on an island as well, it costs more to make it by the time we get our barley and everything delivered. Believe it or not, in Scotland, we actually do have a water shortage in the summer when it gets that little bit warmer. So yeah, as a distillery, it works very, very hard to produce the 3 of these spirits, but it doesn't ever compromise the character and the quality because it makes 3 in such a tiny space. I think it actually does it much better than what a lot of other places do. So as we touched on, 2 spirits are produced using the same stills, washbacks, mash tuns, exact same process, but the spirit cut is later for the Ledaig. And on the nose for me on the Ledaig, this is what's really special about it. is as much as you do get that sort of smoky influence there, it's not like a peat bomb. That smoke doesn't overpower the nose. It's not taking over the character of Ledaig. It's, sorry, I've got a little fly in front of me there. There's hints of grass, there's malt. I get freshly baked gingerbread in there as well. Stewed fruit, there's oak. It's quite a complex nose on this. But on the palate, what I love is that I think the smoke comes through much more readily on the palate than it does on the nose.
I find it quite a sweet smoke, just, you know, that's how the initial sort of hit, and then you start, like you say, unpicking those different flavors that are coming through. But it's not a boring dram. There's lots going on, even on the nose before you even try it. I think it's such an interesting one, and we get so many compliments on this particular whiskey, particularly from those people that are really, really into their peated whiskies. It's a fresh change.
I think Ledaig is just brilliant. We were talking before we went live about how the Sinclair was such good value for money, and this is as well at £43. I think it's really tremendous. Philippus as well, that's used beautiful aromatic peat, the slight vegetable note giving way to sweet fragrant smoke, and we've got water shortage in Mull. You're kidding us, surely.
Just a wee bit on that. So we've actually invested as a company in the reservoir and the hydroelectric dam, or the one that used to be there on Mull, because obviously it's really important to talk about in terms of like making whiskey green, you know, and how we can utilize that particular reservoir to generate some electricity that can help power the island as well as the distillery, and it gives us a little bit of confidence and control of the water that comes down that stream. You know, Cara, who's the distillery manager at the moment, has told me some stories in the past where, you know, it does get warm in the summer, and she can either run the gin still or she can run the whiskey stills, and like, you can't do both because the condensers need that. Well, I don't know if that's true or not, Julieann, but
No, it's true. You're right.
And we have to make choices in production there, because we don't want to compromise the spirit. You'd rather just stop production until you've got the right amount of water flowing down the burn there. But it's really important that we get that right, and we're making efforts to make sure there isn't water shortages at Mull, and actually contribute back to the island, you know, make it a lot greener, and get us onto that carbon neutrality for 2030.
Brilliant. And Catherine said, how many folk work in the distillery, and are they all islanders?
Oh, that's a good question. They are all islanders. There can't be any more than, what, about 12, Luke?
Yeah, no more than that. And I know that we have issues sometimes getting staff because there's nowhere to accommodate them. So you'll have heard in the news plenty of problems about too many people having holiday homes on rural parts of Scotland, and this is the real problem. You know, we'd love to do more production there, but you need more staff to do that. But yeah, I think you're right. It's about sort of 10, 11, 12 sort of number we kind of fluctuate around, isn't it?
Yeah,
we were discussing that recently with I can't remember which tasting it was, on Isla with I think it's obviously a massive issue there with trying to house staff on that island. So I can imagine. Yeah. Tony says also, is the distillery running 24/7 to achieve that output? And that is actually a part of the question I was going to ask you, Julieann, in terms of, you were saying you want to go from 1 to 1.3. Is that a change? Are you adding an extra mash tun, or are you or washback? So actually what I meant to say, or are you just going to distill for longer and run shifts like Tony says, 24 hours?
Yes, we'll run longer shifts, and then in the summer we typically have a sort of 3-week shutdown just for maintenance in the distillery, and then at Christmas we have quite a long shutdown as well. So in order for us to achieve that, we'll just cut the shutdowns to being a lot shorter. So it'll almost be like planned maintenance work will be carried out, and we'll try and fit it into almost like a week, 10 days, and then get the distillery back up and running as quickly as we can. And then the same at Christmas, we'll just close down for as short a period as we can, so that we can get back up and mashing and distilling as much liquid as we can. That's the best way for us to do it, without obviously pushing the distillery to the extent of
cancel Christmas. That's how you're going to achieve it. That's
that's it. Everybody in Tobermory will be in on Christmas Day. Boss's orders. No, they'll still have like 10 days off at Christmas. They won't be having their nice 3-week break that they're used to.
3 weeks at Christmas. Is it a distillery or a primary school?
I know.
To be fair, it's almost business wide. We have a very good tradition of just stop in at Christmas, and we have nearly 2 weeks off for everybody. Never mind
We
the
do.
3 weeks of the distillery staff. So it's a nice, lovely working environment that we have. I have to say.
Brilliant. James said this is very nostalgic for me. The Ledaig 10 was the third whiskey I ever tried after Lager 16 and a black label double black, and initially blew my head off with the smokiness. I felt it was very Cuban cigar, woody, burnt toast. It actually took me a month to go back to it and try it again. Now it's a favorite, as well as the above tasting notes. I now get a black treacle and forest fern note to slightly medicinal, and I love it. So that's a great comment from James. I suppose it also reinforced what we were saying about the different ABVs and stuff as well. I think initially people struggle with the higher ABVs, and then it's hard to go back to it. I think peated whiskey can be a bit like that. It can be a bit Marmite at first, but once you get into it, it's hard for other whiskeys to compare. And Paul had said, wait, your first whiskey was Lager 16. So James, do you want to fill us in on that as an experience? It's funny in Ireland. I don't know if you've ever experienced this, Luke and Julieann, but in Ireland, if people mention Scotch, everyone just assumes it's peated. Do you know? It's the idea that there's unpeated Scotch comes as a shock to people I know who've worked in bars their entire lives, and they're like, wait, what? You can get unpeated Scotch? It's outside of Scotland, everyone just assumes Scottish whiskey smoky.
It's interesting, and from a sales side of things, is probably the best reflection of where those interpretations maybe lie. The way I've seen it in the past is, if you go west, towards Ireland, towards America, and that side of the globe, there's an affinity for peated Scotch whiskey, particularly Islay. That makes marketing quite a struggle for Bunnahabhain, for example, because that's unpeated, heavily sherried Islay whiskey, but it comes as a nice surprise, and that's a lovely, unique selling point we have with it. And then when you're looking at the eastern side of things, and you're going towards Southeast Asia, we've got an office in Taiwan, and we're quite lucky to have that. Our biggest selling whiskey there is Deanston. They love that really characterful, unpeated Scotch whiskey, and it's just interpretations, I suppose. Irish whiskey is much sweeter, in my opinion, than Scotch whiskey. It tends to be, and a lot smoother with that triple distillation factor coming in there too. So if you're looking for the contrast is perhaps the heavily peated stuff that you get from Scotch whiskey distilleries. But you'll see quite a lot of Highland and Speyside distilleries now doing peated whiskies and giving it a go. And some of them absolutely nailing it as well. Gone are the days where most distilleries are malting their own barley and putting the fires on, and the option to chuck peat in there. And it's a much more cleaner process now. The maltings industry in Scotland is huge, absolutely massive. But what that ensures is quality and consistency. It's not one guy that's in charge of it. There's entire computer systems that decide how many phenols are going into that particular batch of barley. And I think it is just to do with cultural tastes and differences, and looking for that contrast a little bit. In America, most of American whiskey and bourbon in that case as well, very, very sweet. So the contrast to that again would be going for something peated and smoky. And Julieann was talking about, and she hinted I need to say something about it, so I will. When you talk about sort of traditional Islay peated malts, they're really, really on that medicinal side for the majority of what they're producing there. Your Lafroigs and your Ardbegs and your Lagavulins and things like that. When it comes to the peat of Ledaig, we actually tend to talk about it, and I'm sure you're getting this on the nose as well. It's much more campfire, bonfire, and sometimes, and marketing will hate me for saying this, like an oil fire. It's something that's a little bit thicker, and it's a little bit more, catches at the back of your throat in a good way, because it lingers there. It's been a while since I've taken a wee sip of this whiskey here, and I can still feel that heavy peated smoke, and your breath almost becomes heavier because of it. And I think that's so distinct for Ledaig. And even when you look at the private bottlings of Ledaig, the character doesn't change. It's still that really smoky, bonfirey peat that you're getting off it. And obviously it's a different kind of peat. And, I think this, Julieann, correct me if I'm wrong, this sits around the sort of 46, 45 ppm, phenol parts per milliliter, by, what's the M stand for again, Julieann?
Parts per million.
That's the 1 million. And yeah, I think, you know, that's pretty consistent. And then I'm really looking forward to like getting you to, so don't, if you haven't finished this dram, don't finish it and compare it with the 18 that's about to come up, because we lose some of those phenols over time, but the 18 doesn't feel like it. But there's a lot more complexity to that smoke coming through, I think.
It's amazing how that can work sometimes, where whiskies that aren't meant to be that you know, the phenol content are dropped off can be way smokier than whiskey. I find that even with Octomores, that some of the ones that are meant to be, this is crazy ppm is 200 and something, and you nose it and you're like, oh yeah, and then you taste it and you're like, actually sometimes an Ardbeg can appear smokier to the palate, you know, even though it's not meant to be as big. I totally agree with what you were saying there, Luke, especially I mean on the continent as well, in France and Germany, peated Scotch is quite big. I mean, in Ireland we only had one peated whiskey for a very long time. Now there's a lot of new distilleries opening up, experimenting with peat, and one of the reasons why they're doing it is because at 3 or 4 years old, and I don't mean this in a pejorative way, I mean it in the sense that they can taste amazing with peated, whereas, you know, when it's not peated, it masks a lot of that kind of youthfulness. You find that there's a great northern distillery in Ireland, and whereas a Teeling distillery have done peated whiskey recently, that their earliest batch was distilled in like 2016 or something, and you would not taste it so youthful, and everyone knows when you're tasting it that it has to be a 5-year-old or whatever, because they don't have the age stock, but you wouldn't guess it if you didn't know that. But anyway, yeah, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Julieann, before I come on to some of the comments in the chat there.
No, yeah, completely agree with everything that both of you have said, and yeah, it's quite hard to, I think, for Ledaig being peated and standing up against some of the bigger names and the sort of peated expressions that come from Islay, it is a completely different peat. It holds its own, and I think it's a magical dram.
It competes on its own terms. Jeff has said, my great grandparents lived in Tobermory, so this is an evening. This evening is a toast to them. So brilliant. Jeff, will think of them when we drink our next dram. We've also got a question there. Malice had a question about the colour. It's very pale, but obviously you said these are all natural colourings, aren't they, folks? Yeah,
so it's quite funny with peated whiskey. So if you even look at our Tobermory 12, which we've already had, essentially they've been, one's been 10 years, one been 12 years, in very, very similar casks. And although there's 2 years of a difference, the Tobermory 12 is a lot darker. So it's a little bit of a kind of hidden myth in Scotch whisky that peated whiskies always seem to be lighter. So even peated whiskies that are in sherry casks, they just don't seem to take on as much colour as unpeated whiskey. I'm not entirely sure anybody understands the science behind it. I'm certainly not smart enough to understand it. But yeah, peated whiskies are always lighter, and we don't add colour because we've not got anything to hide, we've not got anything to mask. And as much as colour is important, what's important for us is the character of the whiskey. So we nose and we taste everything based on the character, not on the colour. You can get phenomenal whiskies that are almost the same colour as white wine.
No, that's well said. It's something we discuss a lot in some of these tastings about, you know, the kind of addition of caramel coloring and all that. But yeah, the color doesn't, you know, shouldn't determine anything. It's the palate. I mean, you have your wave in there, Luke.
Yeah, it's something I profoundly disagree with, because everyone, you know, the reason why people do chill filter and do add color is to make a consistent color. But at the same time, you're removing potential mouthfeel. You're removing a natural color. And actually, if you do have a couple of bottles of Ledaig or any other whiskey really that is non-chill filter, no color added, and it could be 2 Ledaig 10s, one was made 5 years ago and one's what you've just recently bought, there probably will be a color difference because they don't do anything to change the color of that whiskey. When Julieann's doing the blending process for that particular whiskey, her glass is blue, so you can't see the color of the whiskey. And people talk about buying with your eyes and seeing and touching with your eyes, almost like as to what it might be. For when it comes to color of whiskey, I think the only thing you can probably take a guess at is whether it's been an American oak or it's been in a sherry butt or something like that. That would be my only thing, or only indication of the thing that I would take away from a color. So when someone hands me a dram and goes, right, you got to guess what that is, I hate that game because I'm not particularly good at it. I can usually get a region and a barrel, and that's about it. And the barrel will probably come from the taste, obviously, but also looking at the color a little bit and knowing whether it's a finish or a full maturation or something like that. But yeah, no, with the peated whiskey thing, you know, Julieann was talking about, the reason why we have peated whiskey in Scotland is, especially in places like Islay, there's no trees. So what do you burn to make fire? Well, we've got lots of peat, so we'll just burn peat. And it's a historical reference to what Scotland is all about. And you know, I'm from Orkney. Highland Park's the same. You know, it's there's no trees in Orkney. It's too windy. So they have to the fires for heating the home and for drying out the malt and cooking off the moisture was done with peat, and that's why we do have peated whiskey. So that's not something you maybe come across in those regions that I mentioned before about having sweet whiskey. There's plenty of wood about to dry out that malt.
Mm. Yeah, no, it is. I mean, so much. I mean, yeah, we could go down a rabbit hole there, but maybe it's best we come on to the 18. But while maybe we pour the 18, JASFS has asked about drops of water to the whiskey. Now he's got some great answers there about saying basically, you know, I would totally agree with what Stephen and Phyllis said about just adding, you know, be conservative and build up to a point where you're happy. There is no golden rule. Is there anything you'd like to add on that in terms of adding? How much Julieann, when you're like tasting a whiskey going into the blend, you taste it already diluted, don't you? Or do you? I don't know.
No, so I usually start at cask strength, because sometimes there's flavors that come over at cask strength that don't come over at the kind of lower strengths, and then just gradually begin to reduce it down, and then we'll do it at bottling strength, so 46.3. And then 20%. Sometimes some of the kind of like sulfury compounds can be masked when you have it at 46.3, but when you reduce it down to 20, they're a bit more predominant. So yeah, we do it at a number of different strengths just to make sure we've sort of covered all bases for if you're going to add water, add ice. Obviously, it could reduce it down quite a bit, and we don't want any sort of unexpected surprises.
No, that's interesting, because we get different over the years and doing tastings, different blenders and distillers have different ways of approaching. Some say they add in the exact amount of water straight away and then they go for it. You know, I don't know, but yeah, it's fascinating to get different approaches. In terms of adding water to whiskey, Luke, do you do it personally?
I do, yeah. Especially with a whiskey I've not tried before, I'll try it neat, and then just to try and understand it a bit more. You know, I will add a couple of drops of water. There are some whiskies that we've made in the past that I say you do need like a couple of drops of water just to open up a little bit, and those kind of sweeter flavors for me tend to come through when you do that, and it makes a really interesting dram, and some of them remain a little bit tight and closed up if you don't. But like I said before, I trust Julieann to add the right amount of dilution for us to get the best experience. But there's always something else to taste when you're adding that water there. But it's we have a rule at CVH Spirits, no matter if it's the whiskey or the gin or the Angostura rums that we import, you drink it how you want to drink it, and everyone's taste buds are absolutely different. Like the tasting notes that Julieann and myself are providing this evening are what we get from the whiskies. We're not reading off sheets here. You know, Julieann, if anything, makes the sheets because she's the one that's decided the whiskey is going to taste this particular way. But other people will pick up other things. There is. I know it's a cliche to say, but there is genuinely no wrong way of drinking your whiskey and no wrong tasting notes.
No, certainly. I suppose we better. I'm just conscious of the time there. I just realised it's 8:30. So better come on to the 18-year-old. Robert has said in the meantime, he said, when I visited Orkney, I wondered how you store your bins. Those bins are too much. So he said, how does something even at that level cope, let alone trees?
Lots of bungee cord is the answer, usually attached to two hooks in the wall.
Marvellous. Julieann, do you want to introduce us to the Ledaig 18?
Yep, so Ledaig 18 started its journey in bourbon casks. So it was 16 years in bourbon casks, and then we transferred it to sherry casks to finish for 2 years. As I said, that 2-year period just gives us enough for the cask and the whiskey to really interact, and for them to really kind of marry together without the sherry overpowering any of the flavours that come through in the Ledaig. So really rich and fruity on the nose. It's almost like a sherried smokiness. So you get the smoke, but then you're getting the sort of dried fruits, the figs, the raisins, all of that comes through sort of intertwined with the peat. So it's not just the smoke almost like hitting you in the face. I actually get a bit of kind of seaweed in this as well. There's dried chili flakes, I get a lot of black pepper on this one, like freshly cracked black pepper. And then again, quite a bit of oak coming through in this. Yeah, the oak definitely coming from the bourbon cask. So it's sort of a kind of sweet vanilla oaky note that I get. And then on the palate, again, I get the peat much more powerful on the palate than what I do on the nose. It's almost it's a sweet peat, but with a kind of herbal influence. So there is a kind of green, earthy character that comes through. That orange peel that I always get with Tobermory and Ledaig is absolutely coming through here as well. Maybe a hint of espresso, dark chocolate, tobacco, even sort of dark brown notes, if that makes sense. And yeah, again, that kind of peppery note coming through on the palate as well. And as we said, with all of ours, 46.3 unchill filtered, natural colour. So that finish is really, really long and lingering. It's quite a pungent finish. There's a lot of smoke in there. There's licorice, there's sea spray. Again, there's just so much going on in here that it's one of those ones that you need to take a couple of sips, almost let it rest, and then just go back to it. And when you go back to it the second time, what you'll get is going to be completely different on the palate.
It's almost like a smoky Manhattan that's been barrel rested for 6 months or something. It's really interesting. We've got, Paula said they got something really funky on the nose. Funk was the word that came to mind. Said Rohit there. So yeah, I don't know if there is that kind of touch of sulfur on the nose, but I kind of get a lot more of those kind of those Oloroso sherry notes personally, and maybe a touch that kind of aniseed licorice spice. Tony says on the nose for me, the smoke definitely subsides with the 18-year-old. Totally get the tropical bourbon notes. The pineapple initially, complementary struck match again. Julieann has quite a lot of liquid in her glass. Said Jeff. Said a more powerful, definitely supercharged Ledaig. Smoke is not overpowering. I wasn't expecting the 18 on the first sip, but I wasn't expected to like the 18 on the first sip, but it is quite something. Damp leather, dark chocolate. Dark chocolate's a good note. It's definitely, of all the whiskey we tried tonight, it's definitely the most tannic, Julieann. It really grips that kind of tongue on the sides.
Yeah, it does. And we obviously spoke about when you mature whiskey on an island, if you get that kind of coastal influence. And when you speak about tannins, I think sometimes there's two different aspects. Sometimes people get that kind of tannic mouth feel from sherry casks or wine casks or whatever it may be. But for me, I think you also get it from the coastal influence. And as much as this hasn't spent its time maturing on the island, you do kind of wonder. I mean, as we said, tiny distillery, it literally sits on the coast. You do wonder if there's anything going on. God, I nearly spilled that large glass of whiskey going on during that distillation process, where some of the kind of salty sea spray influence comes in. Maybe I'm just trying to romanticize the story of Tobermory and our production at the site, but I do think there's a kind of common theme in Tobermory and Ledaig. It's more in Ledaig that you get that sort of salty sea spray and seaweed coming through, and yeah, you can interpret it as tannins, but for me, it's a kind of saltiness that gives you that feeling in your mouth.
Yeah, not that you say it, maybe like a saline kind of brininess. No, I see what you mean. I suppose I did first interpret it as tannins. Luke, you've been quiet there for a bit.
It's because I really do enjoy this dram. Peated drams are not my first point of call, but I do enjoy them. And with the 18, it's one of the easiest ones I think to kind of get into peated drams. And let me put a torpedo in the romanticization of the tasting notes there, because the one thing I pick up on the nose here, it's not necessarily reflected in the taste. You'll pick up a little bit of it, but if you think of like a smoked German bratwurst with some roast pineapple or something like that, I really do get that, and I can't stop thinking about it. You know, like a really good expensive hot dog, almost with that kind of smokiness coming through in it. And the 18 it's a meaty whiskey. It's got a lot of heft to it, and I know we're in the middle of summer and it's quite humid right now, but in the colder months, do pick up a dram of this, and it comes across just a little bit different. I don't know if it's just the humidity and things like that that's changing it for me, but that time of year, it's one of those ones you can actually picture yourself by a wooden fire in a wingback chair with a Labrador about here whilst it's raining outside, sort of thing. And it's one of those drams. It's a proper warmer for me. It's really, really complex. It's a proper sipper. You're not taking big swigs of this. You're just enjoying every single sip of it. But yeah, I don't know if that German sausage tasting note there has ruined everyone else's tasting notes.
No, not at all. I think it really works. We had some fantastic tasting notes in here, by the way. Mela said 18 reminds me of going into a cowshed when I was a teenager, which he's just left a full stop rather than the ... after that, but there you go. Then salt spray and I'm a savory man, so can see me getting one of these. The nose is like oops, sorry, the comment jumped away from me. The nose is like I'm taking out an apple crumble that I've left in the oven a little too long. Lovely layers of flavor, a hint of eucalyptus on the finish. Jeff says, like the Tobermory, the sherry is there. Like the Tobermory 21, the sherry is there in this Ledaig 18 without dominating. Very good. Often lets the sherry go too far. Luke F is making me hungry for bratwurst, says Bob, and bratwurst cooked in beer, says Paul. So there's some tremendous. I do like a German Christmas market now, like, you know, in Bavaria or something. I wouldn't mind.
We're a few months away yet. But let's not wish the summer away. But it's definitely one of those and a lovely winter warmer. Even though I know we're sat in the middle of quite a humid July right now. But
July, yeah. So this is 84 pounds, and with the discount, I will just double check what that is with the discount. With the discount, that drops to 71.40. So it's great value for an 18-year-old full stop. You pay such a premium these days to get an age statement on a whiskey, let alone one of this quality. So yeah, I'd highly recommend picking one up. You said to have, you know, pick one up when you're by a log fire. I mean, this whiskey is a massive investment, folks, because you have to pay 71.40 now for the whiskey, and then in 3 months' time you have to buy a Labrador. So you know, it's a challenge. I don't know.
I've already got one just for reference.
Okay.
He's not joined us this evening because he just knocked over a whiskey glass, but yeah.
Well, my dog was in here a second ago. I had to shoo him away. So I hope some of you probably heard that. But yeah. Anyway, is there anyone got any tasting notes or flavors or anything you want to add on the 18 before we come on to the 9-year-old? No. Well, you guys don't, but let's see if the chat does. Mel says, exactly, it's a sipper. Always tell my newbie whiskey friends to sip, not glug. Paul says, what's the Tobermory going for tonight? So the Tobermory 12 it's 42 pounds, or 43 pounds.
With your discount, that brings it under the £40 mark. That's a very, very good price for Tobermory.
And Luke, better than that, or just, you know, on top of that, W Club members now, I don't know if you knew this, Luke and Julieann, but W Club members get free shipping on everything from the whiskey shop. So before, you would have had to pay, if you brought it under £40, it would have bought it at $35.70, and then you would have had to pay shipping. But now you get that shipping free with your membership. So you're $35.70 all in just for a Tobermory 12. I mean, that's phenomenal value. You wouldn't find it anywhere else on the internet, even from some of those bargain basement whiskey websites that are out there that are not worth the hassle. So yeah, I suppose that's all on the Ledaig 18. We could always come back to it if anyone's any other points. So we come on to the Bordeaux 9-year-old, because I've been waiting all night to make mulled wine cask jokes. So.
Absolutely. So yeah, this is our 9-year-old Bordeaux. It says cask finish, but it actually spent the majority of its life in these Bordeaux casks. This is a cask strength whiskey, so this is back to our debate of what strength should whiskey be at. So it's at 56.8%. And I know there's a couple of people in the chat just asking about how to drink their whiskey and how much water to add. But just to kind of reiterate again, as Luke said, you're best to try it neat. So when you're nosing your whiskey, just make sure you keep your mouth open when you're nosing it so that you don't get any alcohol burn at the top of your nose, and it lets all the aromas pass all the way kind of through your nose down towards your mouth. That will really kind of open up all the flavors that you're getting. And then when you taste it, take a sip, let it kind of coat your palate, and then take another sip, and that will really be when you get the kind of burst of flavors. I believe that the whiskey will talk to you. When it's on your palate, it will tell you if it's a little bit spicy, if it needs a few drops of water just to open it up a little bit. And if you want to add a few drops of water, that is absolutely fine, but please do taste it first. For me, I do absolutely love this at cask strength. It's got these really unique notes of smoked fudge, eucalyptus oil. What's special to me about whiskey is I believe that it can almost take you somewhere. And for me, this is like Mull in a glass. So when you take a sip of this, it almost transports you to Mull, where there's kind of like burning heather, there's pine cones. Yeah, there's so much going on in this. There's absolutely the influence coming through from the grapes. I also get melon coming through in this, which is kind of unusual tasting note that I don't typically get, but it almost adds this kind of delightful complexity to the flavors. The smoke, it does come through right at the front, but it does kind of gently drift away, and then you get these really gentle, delicate floral notes that emerge. And again, that kind of zesty citrus, for me this time, I get it almost as like kind of lime rather than orange, but that citrusy note is definitely there. You've got your smoke, you've got your influence from the red wine casks. And yeah, for me, this is complex, it's layered. I do love it at cask strength, but I absolutely have to say that if you do add a couple of drops of water, it does open it up, it does change it, and it lets some of those more kind of gentle flavors start to come through. So for me, after a couple of drops of water, I get more of the apple and stewed fruits coming through, and almost like a kind of rose petal Turkish delight note.
I have to say on this one, because it came out of cask strength when I initially tasted it, all that was going through my mind, and some of you will have tasted it before, is the Sinclair series, because we do a red wine finish already, and this is super accessible. It's really, really easy to drink, and it's a Rioja cask rather than Bordeaux, but they're so different. Obviously, this one's an age statement, but this one won't be far off on the age statements. It's just a non-age statement in terms of its age, and this is just so different. And as Julieann said, I got the melon as well. I did get the melon, and I just add that water then. And I've always said, like, there is a fruits thing with Tobermory Ledaig. We both know that, but you do get those orchard fruits. You mentioned apple there, right enough. It does seem to come through with that touch of water to it. And I think after tasting ones that are at 46.3%, and you're going into this cask strength here at 50, was it 58, 56.8, you think you've lost that mouthfeel a little bit because you're getting alcohol, but actually just have a second sip and oh right, okay, we're back onto being, that oily Ledaig and Tobermory kind of feel to it. Is such an interesting dram. And Luke asked the question before about, when are you adding water to your whiskey, and I'm just like, this is one that I would recommend that added water. That's just me. That is honestly just me. But you would just add that touch of water to it, and it just opens it up a little bit. It just dulls that sharp, intrusive kind of alcohol esters and things like that, and then just brings out this really delicious dram with those fruits. It's just fruit. And you're going to get more of that from that Bordeaux cask.
It's fascinating, because I feel embarrassed almost to have suggested the 18 has tannins when you taste this, and now going back to the 18, which is the only one I've actually got a bit left on, but it's so much more sulfuric. Like it's there's elements in there you don't pick up until you compare the two. It's really amazing. Melissa, can you pronounce Ledaig again? I don't know. I'm always, now they've made me super conscious that I butchered, because when you were saying it, Julieann, I couldn't quite get it. I was like, oh no, that's not how I say it. How would you say it?
I say Ledaig, so it's almost like lay chick.
Yeah, chicks are laid in eggs.
Chick
Yeah,
or
laid chick.
legs, yeah, lay chick.
You went for chicks are laid in eggs. That's good. That's good. That's the Balamory version of where that pun could have gone.
I doubt there's an episode on that, Luke. I do.
There must be an episode on hatching chicks. So yeah, lay chick. So there you go. I hope that answers the question. Philip says beautiful dram, definitely getting the thread of lime running through the smoke with light apple and spice undertone. Tony says love them all, but this is right up my street on all counts. So smooth for the ABV as is. Congrats, a superb dram, smoothly smooth for cask strength. Surprisingly smooth for cask strength. Sorry, I've the fifth whiskey now and I can't read anymore. This is £95 and that's before your discount. I've just put the discount in the chat, folks. For those of you who missed it, it's WS16TL. That's Whiskey Shop 16 Tobermory Ledaig. Yeah, Mena said thank you. We'll have to watch tomorrow again. So they're already planning a repeat. If we were a member of the Actors Guild, we might get residuals, folks, but we won't, unfortunately. Is there any other questions from everyone? This is, I suppose, now the point in the night where we ask everyone what their favorite whiskey of the night was, and try to remember to not be sort of swayed by recency bias, because obviously it's easy to go for the last one, and this is a tremendous whiskey, but take a beat and think about it, and then give us your favorite in the chat. Is there anything that we should know about Tobermory or Ledaig before we finish, folks, that you wanted to get across?
Let Julieann go first.
No, just for me, like we say, it's the only whiskey distillery in the Isle of Mull. It is such a unique distillery. It makes 3 spirits in this tiny little space. It is creating big volumes for the size of it. Like I say, we're trying to increase production to 1.3 million litres. It's absolutely well worth a visit. Ledaig is phenomenal from the second it comes off the stills. Tobermory does need that little bit longer just to rest and mature, so you won't see anything younger than 12-year-old coming out of Tobermory, but 2 phenomenal liquids that it produces and well worth a visit. And yeah, I hope you've enjoyed these drams as much as I've enjoyed making them.
Excellent. No, that's a great answer. And yourself, Luke?
I think it's one to watch, especially the Ledaig side of things. Not that Tobermory doesn't deserve the credit too, but for those of you that were here for the Deanston tasting, we talked about hybrid running cask experiments with Deanston liquid because it holds up so well in whatever we put it in. Ledaig and Tobermory are a little bit more complex, so that oily stuff doesn't necessarily do well in every cask. But the reason why we've done, a second red wine cask version of Ledaig is we've discovered it works well and really marries up to those. It's a tannic, as you talked about, flavors, but also the fruitier flavors that tends to come with red wine. And not every whiskey distillery in Scotland can say that by any means. Red wine cask finish whiskies are hit and miss, depending on where you go to get those particular finishes or those maturations, for that matter. And I think
Luke, name names. If you're gonna bring
no, I'm not gonna name names.
You gotta bring receipts. Come on.
I support all my colleagues within the whiskey industry because it's that small that we all need to support each other and make sure that just everyone is buying more single malt Scotch or just Scotch in general. There's nothing to be said that there isn't blends there that work really well in wine cask as well. We did one of those with the Black Bottle, which is one of our lovely whiskies as well, of which there is some Ledaig in there sometimes. Julieann and the team tell me. So we do small releases. Get them when you can. This Ledaig 9 Bordeaux cask is a limited edition release, and once it's gone, it's gone. We've not got other stuff sat there in Bordeaux cask just ready to go to replace it. So I think we're making such an effort with our Tobermory distillery, and because it doesn't have that storage capacity, because we're a smaller company, we're not one of the biggest players in the world. We look after 3 distilleries. Think about the companies that look after 10 or 40. We're in that realm of being able to do the magical things that make those distilleries really, really interesting. And Ledaig and Tobermory is probably up there as one of the most interesting distilleries for that in Scotland, just because of the size of it. And it's, like I said before, it's probably the hardest working distillery in Scotland in the 3 liquids that it produces. And I know that sounds like a marketing pun, but I genuinely mean that. It's really, really cool what you get to do with Tobermory and Ledaig.
No, yeah, it's all 3 of your distilleries are tremendous. And I'm not just saying that. I mean, the first tasting I did with the whiskey shop was Bunnahabhain, and this is the second Tobermory tasting. We've done 2 Deanston as well, and they've all been really tremendous tastings. Every single one of them has had at least 1 or 2 standout, really good value whiskies on there. So it's testament to all you guys and all the teams of the different distilleries. We've got some great answers coming in for people's preferences. Now, first off, there's 2 comments on the Rioja cask. So I put a link in there in reply to Rice Ian's comment, which is the link to the Sinclair, which is the one you were talking about, Luke, I believe. Do you have, you mentioned that it's not far off the Bordeaux. Do you have an ABV, an age statement on that? Do you know roughly how old it is before we come into the breakdown scores?
I'll let Julieann answer that question. Yeah.
So we don't put an age statement on the front of it. It's a non-age statement. The whiskey in it will average round about anything between 6 and 7 years old. So they'll be a little bit older in there, they'll be a little bit younger in there. It's all about getting the balance of flavours. And just to quickly touch on non-age statements, the amount of work that goes into creating them and keeping the character consistent, it is so tough to do, because you are working with different cask types, different ages, different characters. So yeah, absolutely worth trying.
Brilliant. So we'll go through some of the results here. So 4 has come up for Neil, which was the Ledaig 18, but Ledaig 10 is a standout, or Ledaig. We got Tobermory 21 as the standout, Tobermory 21 again, Tobermory 21. And then we've got Tobermory 21. I think Tobermory 21. There's a few there with the 9-year-old Bordeaux cask, but I think just scrolling down, a couple more Ledaig 18s in there. But I think Tobermory 21 has won out on the night, probably with a kind of close between the 18 and 9 of the Ledaig, but I think the Tobermory one just coming out ahead there. So that's really interesting. It's great feedback, folks. Please keep it coming. Melissa, it's so hard to pick a favorite by any of these, but if price was an issue, Ledaig 10 might slightly take it as a pick for me, and that's really interesting. Especially you mentioned cost of living, Julieann. It's something that comes up here occasionally when we do these digital drams, that there's whiskies that you can just say, wow, these are just, you know, phenomenal whiskies, and you know, maybe you could argue that works for all of these tonight. And there's whiskies where you go, this is a tremendous whiskey and it's incredible value, and those are always, for me, that's always, people say, I'm sure you get this a lot, and maybe you could answer this question for me. You know, what's the best whiskey you've ever tried, or your favorite whiskey? You know, and I'm like, well, I can tell you the most interesting dram I've ever had in my life, but it's not my favorite whiskey because I can't afford to sit down and drink it all day. Like, you know, I'm going to be realistic. My favorite whiskey is something that I can actually afford to consume on a regular basis. So yeah, it's one of those, and I definitely for the Ledaig 10-year-old, the 9-year-old, the Sinclair, I think they all, even the Tobermory 12, they all come in into that bracket as really good drams that are also affordable. So yeah, thank you for joining us tonight. It's been really interesting. The discount code again, folks, is WS16TL Tobermory Ledaig, and that will give you 15% off all the whiskies tasted tonight. I mean, you can just find them all, search on the website, but if you go to the product page with the tasting packs available, they're all hyperlinked from there, so they're all in the one place there. And Roy has said Deanston, is it Muscat or Muscat? Finished 1991. Muscat is my favorite. Is my gold standard. So that's brilliant. So just literally last comment of the night. Is there anything you want to add? Maybe in your favorite whiskey you have hiding in the stores, Julieann. It's one at any of the 3 distilleries that you have hiding away. Is there one that you?
That's like asking me to pick between my children. That's a difficult question for me. It's probably got to be a Deanston 12-year-old. Deanston's a kind of understated distillery. I think sometimes it's in the shadow of Bunnahabhain, but it makes phenomenal whiskey. It has amazing history, and the liquid is just absolutely beautiful and so easy to drink. So yeah, I think Deanston 12 is going to take it for me.
Brilliant. And yourself, Luke? I mean, I don't know if you've got a favorite one from within the CVH family.
I do. We tasted it last time, actually, on our last tasting doing Deanston. I'm going to go to the Deanston arc as well. Is the tequila cask Honestly,
Oh, thank you.
I was blown away by this one. I was just going, I'm not a huge tequila fan, but then you talk about like the expensive tequilas and the Highland tequilas from Mexico. It's something that just works so well. It's really, really interesting. And if you haven't had a chance to try it, I know the whiskey shop's got a wee bit of stock there left. Again, limited edition, but you know, the reason why we're here tonight and doing a Tobermory Ledaig tasting is because you guys out there asked us. You wanted a Tobermory and Ledaig tasting on top of the Deanston one after that, and Julieann, who is extremely busy at the minute, being the master blender and making sure everything's ready for the next releases, kind of lent us our time again, and Luke as well. Thanks so much for having us on again, and I hope you guys really enjoyed the tasting. I always enjoy these things. I think they're fantastic, and I love the questions that come through. I think they're very, very relevant to everything that we're trying to achieve.
Brilliant. No, and thank you both for taking your time and helping us get organized. It's been tremendous, and hopefully we'll get you on again. I think the next one on the list to do, I suppose, naturally is another Bunnahabhain and Luke. So maybe we'll take that conversation offline and see if we can work on dates on that. And thank you everyone for the positive comments coming in. And if there's anything we missed tonight, that either you commented and we didn't see it, or there's something that you think about afterwards, or if you're watching this as a recording, and there's something you're curious about, if you just email the link reply to the email that had the tasting link on, and we'll get the question answered for you. Either someone in the whiskey shop will answer it, myself or someone of my colleagues, and if not, we'll pass it on to Luke and Julieann, and we'll make sure that your question is answered. The discount code one last time, folks, is WS16TL. Thanks again to both of you for joining us, and we'll hopefully catch you again soon. So have a good evening.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.